This video introduces MongoDB, which is the NoSQL database that we're going to use for the rest of the labs this semester. So Mongo is a non-relational database, as we spoke about in the lecture, and it stores data in flexible JSON-like documents. So if you've used JSON before, you will find the structure of the document quite familiar. Again, like we spoke about in the lecture, non-relational databases are schemaless, meaning that fields can be different from document to document and data structure can change over time as well. So you'll see that yourselves when you use Mongo, it doesn't specify that you have exactly the same fields in all your documents. Before discussing it further, we'll talk a little bit about the terminology in MongoDB and compared to a relational database. So at the database level, first of all, it's the same thing. Okay, so a database in Mongo is the same as a database in MySQL. But within that database then, rather than having tables, we have collections instead. So a collection is a group of documents. For example, we might have one collection for orders, another for products, another for customers, and so on. So similar enough to our tables. Within tables then in MySQL, we have rows. So we would normally have one row for every instance of a particular thing. So for example, we'd have a row in our customers table for every customer that we have. And it's a similar idea here with documents. So our collection is made up of a number of documents, and within our customer collection, we'll have a document for every individual customer that we have. And lastly then, within those documents, we have fields. And fields are quite similar to columns in a table. As you know, within our table, we might have a number of different columns or attributes or fields or whatever you want to call them in the relational database. With customer, it might be things like their name, address, email, and so on. And it's the same idea here. We'll have a number of different fields, again, like customer name, address, email, and so on, if we're talking about customers. The big difference, I suppose, is that here, every single row in the table has the same columns, whether they're all filled in or not. You know, obviously they don't all have to be filled in. If you've left them not null, then they don't actually, sorry, other way around. If you leave them as allowing null entries, then they might not all be filled in, but they'll still all definitely be there. But here, actually, our documents can have different fields. So if we don't have an email address for the customer, we would just not include that field at all. And then for other customers, we might have 3 emails, so we might include an array of emails instead, whereas some of our emails are just strings and some could be arrays, and so our fields can be different in each document. They can actually have totally different fields, like they don't actually have to have any fields in common to be able to belong in the same collection. In practice, obviously, we kind of want to make sure that they at least have something in common, because if we're doing a query for customers in our customers collection, then we probably do want them to have some similar fields, but it's kind of up to us to enforce that. Mongo itself is flexible in that it doesn't enforce that. Okay, and you'll see this in action over the next couple of weeks. So next then, to talk a bit about the syntax of a document. So as you see here, the document starts and ends with curly brackets, and you can have multiple documents, but yeah, each one starts and ends with these curly brackets. And then within that, we have property and value pairs. So this is the name of the property item, and this one's named quantity, and then the values are box, which is a string in this case, and then the number 20 for this one. And you can see lastly then that these property value pairs are separated with a comma. Okay, And again, that might be familiar if you've used JSON in the past. As well as strings and integers, there's other number types like double and float and so on. We also have Boolean values and dates as well. And again, that's all similar enough to what you've seen in MySQL. But a couple of additional options that we have here are arrays and subdocuments. So you can see here we've added an entry called item codes, and that is an array of numbers or integers. Okay, arrays are indicated by square brackets, which I suppose you're probably used to that kind of syntax now from the programming that you've done. But yeah, so arrays are square brackets and documents are curly brackets. And lastly here then you can see supplier info has as its value another document, as you see with these curly brackets here, and that has its own properties like name and this value here, and then location, which is Ireland. And again, there's a comma there separating those property value pairs. So our documents can be have a kind of a nested structure to them, and it can actually get even more complicated than this. You could have like an array of subdocuments and an array of subdocuments that also have some arrays within those as well. So I suppose, yeah, it allows us to have a more complex document structure than we might have in a relational database. Okay. Lastly then, to talk about object IDs. So you may have noticed here we don't have anything really about this particular document that would uniquely identify it. So in MongoDB, the ID or underscore ID field is sort of similar to the primary key that we would have in MySQL. So you can see this document here as an example has an underscore ID field, and it's an object ID, and it generates this long string of letters and numbers here. So you can specify your own IDs if you want by putting in a value here, underscore ID, and whatever ID you want. But if you don't want to have to do that yourself, then Mongo will insert it for you. So in this case, where I haven't specified any ID, Mongo is just going to add in an underscore ID field with a unique value. Okay, and it usually is quite useful because if you're putting in your own IDs, it's up to you then to make sure that they're unique. Whereas if you just let Mongo take care of it for you, then that's one less thing for you to keep track of.